The Hello Kitty murder in complete detail. Hong Kong's worst crimes include Fan Manyi's kidnapping, maltreatment, and murder. She was mistreated after her death, making headlines. Fan Manyi struggled as an abandoned orphan. Early drug addiction made her a prostitute. She danced in nightclubs and married a drug addict despite her issues. Abuse ruined her marriage. When Fan met wealthy socialite Chan Manlock, Triad's member, things got worse. Chan, a drug dealer and pimp, introduced Fan to drug abuse. Fan stole money and Chan responded angrily. Chan forced Fan into prostitution at his home in March 1999 to repay the larceny. Fans tried to pay, but Chan continued upping prices. Chan and pals beat Fan and stopped her from working for disloyalty. Chan and co-workers' depravity was revealed by Fan's suffering. It may seem out of control, but it will get worse. It laughed too much at her suffering. The group that tortured Fun consisted of Chun Munlok, the leader Leon Weilong, a subordinate gangster of his who is said to have been either 19 or 21, and Liang Qing Chu, aged 26, another one of his underlings, but there was soon one new member to that group, of 14-year-old minor named Ah Fong. She, although she had been reported to be one of the girlfriends of one of his underlings, ended up being a victim of Chan himself as he groomed her more and more over time. This girl, though despite being very young and obviously manipulated, was ice cold herself. She very much enjoyed helping the group to mistreat Fun. She would even giggle and laugh hysterically. While doing so, she took the opportunity to get creative and would even come up with her own ways to brutalize the woman herself. She was always ready and willing to join in the group. Unsatisfied at the amount of money Fun was bringing in, continued to mistreat her more and more. They tied her up, punched her, and kicked her all over. They would force themselves on her repeatedly. As much as they wanted, they even forced her to eat excrement. They started hitting her with metal bars, hit her and stabbed her with kitchen utensils, smashed pieces of furniture over her, and even tied her up in a standing position to use her as a punching bag. It got to the point that one day alone, she ended up getting kicked in the head about 50 times. It has been said that Fun even got pregnant around this time. But the mistreatment continued. Regardless, when she was wounded, barely able to even move, the group would rub spices into her open wounds to further ensure that she wouldn't be running away or moving much at all. They would burn her legs with hot candle wax repeatedly and even melt plastic over her legs. She was then forced to consume even more urine and excrement. The group would then force her to smile and say that she enjoyed all of these things. If she refused, they would just mistreat her even worse, getting even harsher with their punishments. All throughout this time, Fan's husband and kids wondered where she even went. They were left with nothing to do but worry about her and hope that she would come home. The group started getting more and more creative, utilizing anything they could find throughout the apartment that could possibly inflict pain that could be used as a weapon. They would set plastic straws on fire and press them against the bottom of her feet until they were covered in painful burns and blisters. They would then hit her in the feet with sticks and whatever else they could find. All throughout this, they would throw chili oil onto her wounds and dump oyster sauce onto her face. They then made her drink the combination of oils. Afterwards, it was a game they played. If she didn't pretend to be happy, then they would beat her harder. They told her to smile while they burned her. It was a fun atmosphere set off on. It got to the point where they started using Fun as a toilet, directly urinating onto her face and sometimes even into her mouth. If she spat any of it out, she was severely punished. Ah Fong once even defecated into a shoebox and forced Man to eat it, which she thought was hilarious. The group started wrapping her in electrical wires and hanging her from a hook on the ceiling. They would then mistreat her in any way that they wanted, usually hitting her with iron bars and leave her there overnight. Eventually, they stopped feeding her entirely the bodily fluids they would subject her to became her only form of sustenance. They continued to pack her wounds with dirt, spices, salt, and really anything else they could find to make sure that she never felt any sort of relief. Needless to say, after seeing the shape she was in, potential clients started refusing her services, meaning that she was no longer pulling in any money for the group. Fun would lie on the floor, starving, drifting in and out of consciousness, while the group hung out and watched through or played video games. She was broken and playing with her wasn't so much fun after that, but we carried on anyway. Ah Fong said she had nothing better to do and would join the group's terrible activities, smiling. She added that Ah Fong's activities are never exposed but long. One night, the gang went out for drinks to keep the fan. They fastened the fan and placed her on the bathroom floor before closing the door as usual. Fun died cold, alone, and in misery on April 15, 1999, while her kidnappers were out of the house following a month of maltreatment. Ah Fong used the bathroom when the group returned to the residence after a few days. She entered to see Fun dead on the floor. The men discussed body disposal. They disputed her death. They chose to go to the arcade and play video games while Fun lay in the restroom. After a while, they went home, slept, and ignored the problem the next day. Chen gestured at Ah Fong, who was sleeping, to immerse a bag of intestines in hot water to stop the odor. Liang Xing Cho was in the middle of boiling the head himself and called off Ongor to come and look at it. She said that she was scared and didn't want to look, but he said it's okay, just pretend you're watching tab. She decided to give it a peek and decided that he was right. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Given that this had already taken 10 hours, the group started getting pretty hungry, how they could even get an appetite. While all of this is going on is maybe one of the biggest mysteries about this case. If you ask me, while boiling Fan's head in a pot, stirring it ever so often, they decided to throw some noodles onto the adjacent burner. They used the same spoon to stir their soup as they did to stir the head, alternating between the two. By the time their meal was over, the head was now nothing but bone. They decided to take the skull and sew it into the head of one of their Hello Kitty plushies, a large mermaid one. This is obviously where the name of the case comes from. It's still unknown why they even decided to go through the trouble of doing this, given how drug-fueled the whole operation was. It's safe to say that if there even was a reason, it might not make a lot of sense now. For unknown reasons, they decided to keep some other bits as well, namely a tooth and some organs. However, they disposed of the rest in the apartment complex is garbage. After a month of silence, it seemed they had gotten away with everything. Then that changed. Ah Fong reported being haunted to the police a month later in May. She strangely told them this spirit was murdered by electrical wire. The police initially dismissed her as having dreams or being stupid, but when she said she had played, they believed her. Each member was arrested and tried. Anton, possibly a pseudonym, testified against the organization. But it was amazing. They couldn't imagine something so awful happening so close in a safe modern city. To satisfy Fun's spirit and find closure, Ah Fong testified for immunity in the 6-month trial, excited by the strange combination. Cooking pots, skull, and body refrigerator were detailed. She said this would erase her guilt and end the haunting. The court's heard psychologists say the 3 men were remorseless. One important obstacle to the investigation was that Fun's body was where it was, thus there was no evident cause to investigate. Given the evidence, they couldn't determine a cause of death. It may have been abuse or overdose. Sadly, he sentenced the 3 to life in prison with parole after 20 years in December 2000. Hong Kong courts rarely see such brutality. Evil, brutal, and vicious. He claimed the public has a right to be protected from people like you, and that mainland China would have executed all 3 immediately. HK had no executions. Fun, the victim's husband, was happy with the 3 men's life sentences. He adds, "How can I ever forget that Fun was released into foster care free of charges? It's unclear where she is now or how she turned out." The sentence stood because the 3 men's lawyers didn't appeal in 2003. Fun's relatives cremated her skull in 2014. September 2012 saw the demolition of the Sim Sui, Hong Kong apartment building at 31 Granville Road where the murder occurred. After 20 years at a restaurant, the 3 men, except for one release in April 2014, have not been paroled. He returned on the police's radar after his lawyer appealed and convinced the courts there wasn't enough evidence against him. After groping a 10-year-old girl's chest as a server in January 2022, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. He's back in prison as of this video. If they get parole is unknown. The movie's Human Pork Chop with My God have some tactics, and there's a secret in my suit to depict this scenario. Bones on American crime drama profiled the case because it was famous worldwide. Today, Hong Kongers honor Fun Mini annually. Would you like it? Hit the like button and subscribe to our channels for more interesting and informative videos.